It's episode 50 of Chris and Company. Looks like we made it. I don't know if I've ever been a part of anything that's made it to 50 episodes, so this is obviously pretty darn cool. And happy to have our guest on today, who will be Jim Costa from 97.1, Central Michigan graduate. Going to pick his brain about all things going on in the world of Detroit sports and Michigan sports and just sports in general. He's one of the best. Really looking forward to talking to him. I was at Central Michigan, I believe, when he graduated. I think he was class of 2015. Never crossed paths, but happy to cross paths now. We'll get to all that. But before we jump into the interview, just want to say you can find me on Twitter at Castellani 2014. Do I have a frog in my throat? I have a scratchy voice. All right, whatever. We're moving on from that, trying to get into these shows a little bit quicker. CastellaniContent.com. Everything is there. All Tiger videos, Michigan videos, Lions videos, podcasts, vlogs, what have you. We are consistently keeping the geese flowing. We've got the shows up every single week. We're going to be doing more YouTube vlogs. Going to be talking to Austin about some ideas that are coming down the corner here. And like I said, we want to get a little bit more expansive with the guests that we have on here. But of course, number one goal is to make sure that we're locking down that Michigan market, that Detroit market. I think we're doing the best possible job of that. I'll do the thank yous and the soliloquies at the end here after we've made it to the end of our 50th episode. But yeah, anything else? Oh yeah. Apple Podcasts, Spotify. If you're watching on YouTube, hit that like button, hit that subscribe button. Let's get those watch hours up. Anything else? No, man. I think this might be record time. Let's jump right into it. Here's our interview with Jim Costa. Jim Costa on the program today, episode 50. We are halfway to the to the century mark here, so this is a little Chris and Company accomplishment. You've heard him on 97.1. You've heard him on the Cash the Ticket podcast. You maybe, and I was looking this up last night because I was trying to do a little research. We probably crossed paths at Central Michigan for like a week and a half because you were class of 15, right?
Yeah, fall of 15 was when I graduated.
Okay, so then it was probably a little bit more because I got there, transferred in the second semester of 15. So we probably had about 2 semesters there. I lived in the towers my sophomore year for that year when you were probably on the verge of graduating. So small world.
Yeah, but I was mostly phasing out at that point. Yeah.
Yeah, well, I mean, it shows. Look, it's small world, obviously, and I guess we'll start with a few central related questions, and one is kind of more central adjacent. Have you recovered from this most recent weekend with Western Michigan winning? I didn't realize first national championship in any sport, and you were in the inner circle of hell. You were there at Ground Zero as you watched the Broncos take care of it. How you doing in hindsight? You feeling a little loopy?
A little bit, and I do want to clarify. I didn't go there on a spike to troll them because I think some people on the internet thought, "Wow, he's taking this too far. He's going to St. Louis just to watch them lose. He deserves this." My in-laws go to the Frozen Four every year, and they've invited me, and this is the first year it made sense. And of course, we didn't know who was going to be there at the time. Of course, it's Western Michigan. Of course, they're the loudest crowd, and they showed out. So everybody I'm running into on the streets got Western gear on. I couldn't escape it. And I had to sit in my own little personal hell as a Chippewa and watch Western, who actually has a hockey program, do the unthinkable, win the entire national championship. So, yeah, it was kind of painful, Chris.
Yeah, I was having that conversation with a friend of mine over the weekend, which is when we went to Central, I'm like, was I just a bad student and never went to hockey games, or did we just not have a hockey program? And it's weird how that works. There's certain major universities that don't have hockey programs or even baseball programs. Like I don't think Wisconsin has a baseball program. I remember.
I don't believe they do either. It's Title IX scholarships, and all the teams in the state of Michigan that have men's hockey have made a Frozen Four. We have great hockey talent in the state. Yep. Central just has never prioritized it. So, people said, how can you view them as a rival if they don't even have a hockey team? And to me, I would just say, I went to the school. I don't like Western. I don't like them in anything. I would hope if you're a rival of anybody, you could relate to that and you could understand how miserable it would be to watch them win.
Yeah, to me, that's hypocritical on that side because I'm telling, if Michigan didn't have a hockey program, which wouldn't make sense, obviously they've had a historically good hockey program, but if they didn't, and Ohio State was in the Frozen Four, I know that there would be Michigan fans who were paying attention and adamantly rooting against that.
And
sports.
If you were there, you wouldn't root for them.
Of course, right? Yeah, no, yeah. It's the nature of the rivalry. But moving ahead to some more college related stuff, and it's interesting how a lot of this kind of relates back to some of the directional schools as well. I want to ask about the portal because to me the transfer portal has become one of these things that very well intended, I would argue necessary to a point, that has become, I didn't think I'd ever use this word, but somewhat gluttonous in what it's become, in the sense that I think the original plan was we want to make sure that guys are maximizing the finite amount of time they have in college. And, the whole sitting out a year when you transfer thing shouldn't be, that shouldn't be a punishment. There's a million reasons why guys transfer, but we're in this age now. And I want to focus mainly as it pertains to college basketball, where I feel like the roster turnover year in and year out is going to be so drastic for so many of these major schools that there is, at least from my perspective, and maybe I'm just getting old, a certain charm to the game or to the sport that I feel like is lost. Where do you stand on it right now as somebody who's kind of been covering this stuff pretty consistently?
Yeah, I mean, it's the consequences of the actions we took. We as a sport, college basketball, college football, well-intentioned, right? We want these guys to get a slice of the pie. These are billion-dollar TV deals in the case of March Madness, and the players are the product. They're the reason we tune in. They should be compensated. They should get a slice of it. But our intended consequences are not the actual consequences, because now what we have is, it's not a guy doing a burger deal at the local pub. It's not a car dealership ad and, hey, everybody's getting to make some money off the name. It's not even a direct check from the school. Instead, it's this nebulous third party that you can manipulate and leverage, and in some cases overplay your hand, as we saw with Nico Iamaleava at Tennessee. But we're just starting to push to the bounds of this, where there has to be a pushback. There has to be some kind of structure here, because I don't think people fight that college athletes should be paid anymore. They used to. We don't fight that anymore. And we don't fight that they should be able to transfer, because a coach can up and leave tomorrow. He's the grown-up. He's the adult. He should know better. He can waffle on his commitment tomorrow. But if a player sees a greener pastures, that was frowned upon for years. Love that they can transfer, but we got to do a little better at putting some guardrails on this.
Yeah, it has gotten, it's crazy how quickly it's expanded, because I remember, I think it was 21, the NIL stuff was all instituted. And it was when Hunter Dickinson was still in, one of his 8 years that he was in college, and was at Michigan, and was doing stuff on his Instagram page for promotions for Lowe's and some, kind of local networks. I'm thinking, okay, this is what this stuff kind of should be. And 2 years later, he's getting paid an insane amount of money to go to Kansas, and we're seeing guys who we thought were program guys who are transferring. And I was talking to somebody about this the other week. It bothers me more in college basketball because there's so many guys on a college football team, and I do still feel like the age of program guys, recruiting your guys, bringing them in from high school, I don't think that's ever really going to go away. It might evolve in some capacity in college football, but I mean, you've had Rick Pitino openly admitting we're not recruiting high school players right now.
You see, Indiana didn't have a player on their team at one point this offseason. John Calipari a year ago gets to Arkansas and says, I'll have to talk to the team. There is no team. You're right. There's meeting over. That was quick. You're right. It's more egregious in college basketball, but it's also more necessary in college basketball, because you look at these teams that win it all, and they're populated with not one or two, but most of the starting five are portal guys.
That's the frustrating part of it, is I can stomp my feet about it and get frustrated, but at the end of the day, you have to adapt. I talked about this with, it's not portal related, but I talked about it with the Bryce Underwood situation at Michigan, where to me, $17 million for a college athlete who hasn't played a game yet is whack. But I'd rather have him. And if that's the game you got to play, that's the game you got to play. It's kind of the frustrating kind of duality that comes with this. Switching gears a little bit, because obviously, you've been you've ascended very rapidly, man. You've got a lot to be proud of with the job you've done coming on to 97.1 and everything. And I always like to kind of get into people's backgrounds and ask them, what the original plan was. And I mean, you've been, a natural at this. You've got a great voice for it. You always have. At what point did you want to be a broadcaster?
So I wanted to work in sports in some capacity. And I think a lot of people can relate to that. I was in high school. You go to these counselors and they try to help you figure it out. And I didn't know specifically what I wanted to do. But right around that time, you're about 16 years old and you're in the car and you're driving home from football practice. You're driving into school in the morning. And I would listen to 97.1 The Ticket. And, I'd listen to Stoney in the morning. I'd listen to Mike Valeni with Terry Foster in the afternoon. I'd go on to intern with Carson Anderson. So I got to know the station really well. And radio always was attractive to me because it felt like you had a blank canvas every day. You can talk directly to your listeners. You can take phone calls. You can tap into the emotion. I dabbled with some play-by-play, just wasn't good at it. Also wasn't something I felt passionate enough to pursue to get better at. I did a little TV. Again, you work a lot, those guys in TV, for only a little, a sliver of the news to do sports. I found like radio was perfect for me because I like to argue. I like to banter. I think you can have a lot of fun in radio, and it was always something I wanted to pursue. So I gave it my all at CMU. I got involved with the radio stations there. I interned all over town, all over the state, and it led me down the path I went. And
obviously, look, you've been on the air for a while, and we were kind of waiting for something to open up for that kind of full-time gig to come your way. And of course, Michael Stone goes into I guess. Is semi-retirement a proper way to put it? Because I feel like we still hear Stoney all the time, and we've had him on this show, and like it's one of those things. He loves sports so much and talking sports so much that like I think he'll just do it forever. But he does. He no longer has his name attached to the show. That's the role that you've earned. I want to try to figure out the right way to phrase this question, but you're replacing. I mean, they call him the Godfather for a reason, right? A guy who's been doing this for so long, and it's an incredible honor, and it's not something that you're going to say no to. Was there any part of that you felt was daunting, considering what you were replacing as a guy that Michigan has gotten to know so well over the last few decades?
Yeah, I mean, the outpouring of support in his final, official morning shows you just how much he touched people and related to people and connected with people. And I can't replace that in 6 weeks, 6 months, 6 years. Maybe 60 years. I mean, he just touched people in such a way that you can't replace it. So I guess the only thing I could do, the only way to get yourself in the right frame of mind is you don't try to replace him. You be who you are. You do your show. And I had privately told people my least favorite part of it was going to be the first few weeks because you can't fake chemistry and you'll be frustrated because it won't be where you want it to be. And it just takes time. But I love how the audience has embraced me. They like to give me a hard time. I like to think I'm willing to dish it and take it. And that's only going to grow as we do this. And we'll stumble into bits and jokes and humor and all the other stuff that comes with it. But you can't do that overnight. So, no, I very quickly realized just be you and let the cards fall where they will. You bring up,
chemistry. And it's one of those things that whether it's actors on film or people on the radio, it's something where you can tell when it's there. But as somebody who's kind of been trying to develop it over their time with other people as a broadcaster, is there a point where you realize that you've started to kind of develop that chemistry with somebody, or are there telltale signs in your mind that you finally kind of started to really make that connection?
Yeah, I mean, it's not like one moment I could point out to you right now, right. and it's always developing, but I would notice that Jansen would give me a harder time. And I know that's how I am with my buddies. I'm snarky, I'm sarcastic, I'm going to rib you, I'm going to get under your skin. And if you'll do it back to me, that's how I know we're buds. And I think John's a really nice guy for people who've met him or know him. He's a super nice guy, great father. I want him to pick at me a little bit, pick some fights with me. I'll pick some fights with you. And at the end of the day, he'll put his arm around me because my arm won't fit all around him. But we'll have a good time laughing afterwards. And, we'll get done with a show or a segment and we'll be laughing. And I think that's the thing is he's got a great laugh. So as we develop that and build that rapport, it's only going to get better.
I think that comfortability is such a relatable thing to the listening audience as well. Because that goes across platforms as well, whether it's sports radio or I always mention like one of a show that I got into in college after it was, discontinued, was the Opie and Anthony show, which had a million comedians on, and they would come on there and they would say the meanest stuff to each other, just trying to bust balls. And it would be like one of those things, like at the end of a shift, they kind of wipe their hands and, all right, we're good. That was good work, everybody. Let's go. You want to go out to lunch? Let's do it. Like, there's kind of, once you develop that comfortability.
Yeah, your boundaries and feeling like you can, push it a little bit.
Yeah, and I think it's an interesting perspective of what you have now working with John Jansen, obviously Michigan legend, NFL vet forever, right? I mean, amazing career. And it's a unique thing to me when somebody, is working in broadcasting for the longest time, covering athletes, and then they are put into a situation where they're doing a broadcast with a former athlete. And so in the time that you've worked with John, or even I guess this kind of extends to any athletes you maybe have worked with on the air, what's the number one thing you learn working with a former athlete that you might not have learned working with a broadcaster on the air?
Yeah, it's a good question. It's maybe a tough question to answer because you just kind of do it instinctively. Like, John is who he is. He has that experience. We don't ever hesitate to tap into it. He knows ball, he knows football, he knows sports. I mean, he played high level baseball and basketball, and he likes sports beyond football. So it turns into more of a conversation. And I don't try to fixate on the fact that he played in the NFL, that he is this legendary Michigan icon. It just kind of naturally is part of the dialogue. It's part of what he can relate to and speak to. And I don't think I try to do anything extra with it. Or try to overemphasize it. I think it's better to just let that be naturally.
Yeah, I think you're right. And I also think like it's, if you try to look at it from that point of view, they're almost,
then you pigeonhole him. Then he can only do this. It's like no. John can cut it up with anybody.
Yeah, and I think you almost run the possibility of running into imposter syndrome with yourself, where it's like, well, this guy was actually in the trenches. This guy actually, like,
I'm not allowed to have an opinion. No. We can all speak on it. And I think that's key to what we do in media is I appreciate the perspective of those who played, but I don't think you have to be a 5-star chef to tell people the food was either good or bad at the dinner you just had. You don't have to be Martin Scorsese to have an opinion on the film you just watched. I think you have to get over that really quickly, that you got to seat at the table too, and you just got to speak to your truth.
Yeah, no, the one thing, and I've said a lot of things and been wrong about a lot of things, but I will never claim that I can catch up to a Tarek Skubal fastball.
No.
Like, that's not going to be like, that's not my MO. I watch, I assess. That's what we have the privilege of doing. Last kind of 97.1 related question is, you obviously do the Cash Ticket podcast with Mike Valenti. And I think Mike in many ways is the last of his kind. I think he wants to be, in the sense that he's one of the broadcasters left that has as the kids say, aura or mystique to them as a personality, because I think we live in this age now, like, people are on social media. You get to, through social media, you can get to know people's personal lives, families, what have you. And Mike is kind of the one where there's almost like this, I don't want to praise him too much, but like this kind of in the shadows, almost Batman element to, what's he like in real life? Have you ever met him? Have you ever seen him? Like, he's a guy who who's on a public forum, but doesn't necessarily go out of his way to be a public figure. What's something that you've learned about him that you may have gotten wrong based on the person you thought you knew, listening to him all those years on the air?
I would answer it this way. I think one of the questions people ask me about him all the time is he really like that?
Yeah.
And what do you mean by that? Right. He's very loud, and he can be, brash and that's who he is. But I think people also get it mixed up that, like, he's also been a good person to me. And I think he's a good person to the people around him. Something would go wrong in my personal life, he'd send me money to grab dinner or something. I mean, just the small little things that he would do to help the people in his life. He's very loyal to the people around him. He takes care of the people around him, friends, family, colleagues. It's this persona that he's a bad guy. I don't think that's at all true in my experience, working with him and hanging out with him.
Yeah, and really even that assessment mainly comes from him having opinions that other people might disagree with. Like, I don't recall
that comes with the job, though, right?
Of course.
That's
of course, but it's like I think there was a similar thing, and obviously Mike's reached a much greater place in his career. But in the early days of me doing the Tiger videos, where like I'd run into people, and every so often, be like, you're not as angry in person as you are when you're talking Tigers. It's like, well, that's because I don't know. You're not going 0 for 5. Like, I don't. It's much when I'm talking about my team and the frustration they bring me. It's a completely different kind of mindset. So yeah, I mean, in general, those are kind of the stories I've heard about him, and I do think like for him to, I actually give him credit honestly for him to be able to kind of keep up the. Maybe anonymity isn't the right word, but that kind of mystique in 2025 when everything is so like heightened and there's, photos, videos of everyone. I think it's generally kind of impressive and unique.
Yeah, I think he's talking about it. He's spoken about it more, and I wouldn't want to mischaracterize anything, but yeah. He finds it to be refreshing to not be on social media. And I think there are times, Chris, and I can relate to it, and you can relate to it, where we like the rush, the having the conversation with people and the dopamine hit and the notifications. But at the end of the day, it's not real life. And you can get caught up in fighting with people that you don't need to be spending hours fighting with. And it warps your sense of humanity. And it's probably a good thing to not be obsessed with social media. And he's just taken it to the extreme where I'm not even going to deal with the headache or the nonsense of it. So on that level, I guess admirable, because I think on some level, we'd all like to be able to do that. But at the same time, I like chopping it up with people. So I don't think I could ever go away from it.
Yeah, I do as well. But I also completely value and understand the perspective of everything you need from me, you get from 2 to 6. Like there's nothing else that I can really add to the conversation beyond the 4 hours that I'm on the air every day. Let's pivot a little bit to talk about some of the teams that have been making waves in this city. I mean, it feels weird considering where they were to talk about the Detroit Pistons now in a playoff situation, and that's kind of where I want to start because I would consider myself an NBA novice, and which is surprising as somebody who like one of the reasons I love sports is the 04 Pistons and some of those 2000s Pistons teams. So like it's one of those things where I'm wanting them to be successful, and in the action or the time in which I've watched them this year, like what I've noticed, and this is as simplistic a take as you're going to have, is when I watched them in past seasons, I just didn't really feel like they had any good players. And this year I just look on the roster and I say, these guys are pretty good. I mean, not just Cade, but they've spaced the floor. Like I know enough about basketball to know when good basketball is going on. And I see the guys who can shoot and actual defense, not force, committing a bunch of turnovers on the offensive end. In your mindset, what's just been, I mean, outside of roster turnover, the biggest change that you've seen in the organization that's allowed them to literally triple their win total from a season ago?
Well, let's just start with JB Bickerstaff because the coach had to tie a lot of loose ends up. It wouldn't matter who they brought in if Monty Williams was still coaching this basketball team. I firmly believe that. But you add Beasley and Tobias Harris and Tim Hardaway Jr., who you look at them and think these are fringe starters. These are bench guys, but they're all shooters. And it allowed Cade Cunningham to grow and step out and have a little more room to operate. He wasn't having to drive into the paint where there are already 2 or 3 guys and it was clogged up. He could actually orchestrate their offense, and it's not a surprise he's blossomed into a star. But I think the other thing that you'll notice if you've watched the Pistons this year is they're fun. And I don't mean that in a simple way. I mean, they get a stop on defense and then they run in transition and then Cade throws an alley-oop to Jalen Duren and then they do it 6 or 7 more times. And they're just a lot of fun, but you don't get there unless you get the stop on defense first. And that's what I would harken back to coaching. Defense is effort. It's coaching. JB Bickerstaff has embraced, I guess, the potential of this roster because they had a lot of these guys already. Isaiah Stewart and Asar Thompson and obviously Cade. These guys needed the right coach to come in and tie up those loose ends.
I think that both in college and professional basketball and really all levels, like roster construction and how you utilize that roster is the most important thing. Even in some ways, even more so than talent, because you can have 5 good players on the floor, but if they all play the same position and it's this kind of useless thing where they're not spacing the floor, it's meaningless. Like I thought Cade last season, people pointed to how brutal the efficiency numbers were. And my whole defense was like, well, he's the only player that's really capable of doing anything here. Like I guess I'd rather have him with the Trae Young, nonsense of shooting the ball 30 times. And of course, you bring up the biggest step. You bring in Trajan Langdon, you bring in JB Bickerstaff. 2 questions about him. Number one, and I've tried to ask around because it's somewhat, near Detroit. I know people in this fan base. Why did he get fired from Cleveland?
I don't have like some dirt or anything. I just think the perception was they had kind of capped their season. Their ceiling was reached and they needed a new voice to get them to the next level. And we see this in hockey. We see this in basketball, a lot of turnover. These are long seasons. And I wonder if a locker room tunes you out, the quick fix is you bring somebody else in. I don't know if it's going to lead to a title for Cleveland, but I know it's the best thing that could have happened to Detroit.
Yeah, no, and it's worked out on both ends. It's just even when he was let go and the Pistons brought him in, because even typically, and there's exceptions, when you hire a guy who's just recently been fired, there's some element of damaged goods. And I didn't know of anybody who was like, "Oh man, bad hire." People are.
But if you're an NBA coach, everybody's been hired to be fired. I mean, look at these guys. All these guys that win NBA championships get fired 2-3 years later. So it shouldn't be a hesitation to give a guy a look.
Yeah, has it changed to a certain? I don't know where you stood before, but I've always had kind of this weird assessment of NBA coaches where I feel like there will be instances in which I think they matter incredibly well. And there's instances in which I feel like they're simply really just glorified babysitters. Like has Bickerstaff kind of changed your perspective on that? Or have you always believed that coaches in the NBA are extremely valuable?
No, and that's actually a really good question because I hadn't stepped back and thought about it that way. I mean, talent wins out. There's a reason a lot of the teams are led by 2 and 3 superstars, and very rarely do we see a coach come in and wave a magic wand and the average players win a championship. What I think a coach does is it helps you get up off the mat. It maybe gets you from, and they won 14 games last year.
I know.
It gets you up off the mat to now they're a 44-win team. And I think a coach might even be able to get you to 55, maybe even 60, a great regular season team. But talent's, you're going to shorten the bench in the playoffs. Talent's going to dictate. And there's only so much you can do. There's matchups and coaching matters, but I think players eventually grab the reins and either win the title or they don't win the title.
You mentioned it, obviously 14 wins a year ago and a season that, and I, it's the last thing I want to do is recap that kind of miserable campaign, but coming into that year, there was some belief of maybe this is when they ascend. New coach in Monty Williams. He was, they gave him the lucrative contract. Cade was finally going to be healthy, and they bottom out. You come back this year. I mean, a historic turnaround, not just for the Pistons, but really in NBA history, a historic turnaround. Does what they did this year say more about what JB Bickerstaff and company are capable of doing, or more about what Monty Williams was not able to do here with the talent he had?
It's a little bit of both. I think what I'd start with is 30 win improvements don't happen in the NBA. And this is just the 6th time in league history. And the other 5 times, the team added an MVP, either a future or former MVP. So, Chris, I'm talking about Celtics draft Larry Bird or trade for Kevin Garnett and Ray Allen. I'm talking about the Spurs get Tim Duncan or the Admiral David Robinson, or Steve Nash joins the Phoenix Suns and wins multiple MVPs. The Pistons added Tobias Harris. I like Tobias Harris.
Good player, yeah.
They needed a power forward. That was, you mentioned roster completion and filling out a roster and the missing ingredients. He's not Kevin Garnett. He's not Tim Duncan. He's not Larry Bird. So this is one of the most remarkable turnarounds in NBA history. I think that tells the story, and I think you do got to give credit to the coaching staff for unlocking it.
For sure. And to the credit of Tom Gores, who has been much maligned here and often for good reason, the one thing he's not afraid to do is spend money. And they actually did go out and make some moves to improve the roster, which coming off of a 14-win season, a lot of owners, it sounds weird to say it, would not be willing to do that.
Tom Gores took a lot of heat, specifically the one comment that enraged me. And I think a lot of people, you know where I'm going with this.
The apart from winning.
Aside from winning, we're doing great in the community. Yeah. Tom, you're not a charity. People pay money. They want you to win. If you lose, they leave angry. This is a central tenet to sports. We compete. We keep score. We want to win. You don't get to set aside winning. And it felt so out of touch in the midst of an NBA record losing streak. Tom, that's the whole story. No one cares if you're in the community donating, coats and mittens. I mean, it's nice, but you can do that aside from owning the Pistons. Owning the Pistons is about putting a winner. He did put his money where his mouth is. So I don't hesitate to on the same track, say he shelled out $60 million to admit he was wrong. There's not a lot of people who will admit they're wrong, period. There are very few people who will spend $60 million to publicly admit that they were wrong. Tom Gores did it, and I don't want to leave him out of this. That's also critical to where they are right now.
Do you think the backlash that came with those comments had something to do with him spending in this offseason?
Maybe a little bit.
Yeah.
I don't want to overinflate the value of yelling into a microphone on the radio or, collective social media. I think you can apply some pressure. I think they were embarrassed. I think there's no way to deny. I mean, that losing was the most embarrassing thing. It didn't matter that we were echoing it on social media or on the radio. They were embarrassed. And I think that was the driving force.
I would agree. I think that it plays a small factor just because, and we'll talk about the Tigers in a minute, but I remember several years back when the team, I mean, they couldn't score a run. And Chris Ilitch made those comments of like, I like the progress that I'm seeing from the organization. And he just got ripped for it. And then a few weeks later, Ken Rosenthal wrote that piece. I mean, it's kind of an Avila bash fest. And then, a few weeks after that, Avila gets fired. Like, I think, is it a huge impact? No. Does it kind of put a bug in these guys' ear of like, there's a lot of unhappiness amongst the fan base? But
does it come up in a board meeting or someone goes, hey, just so you know, the fans aren't happy? Yeah, I'm sure that's it.
The chart here has a 99% disapproval rating. So I think, and trending downwards. So might want to do something about that. I will get to the Tigers in a second, but I'm trying to, we're trying to broaden the horizons a little bit. And that's why I like to have smart people on and ask about the Red Wings real quick, which is a team I don't talk about a ton. And the reason for it, honestly, has been they haven't really given us a whole lot to talk about over the last several seasons. And I mean, it's a weird thing because in the same way that I grew up accustomed to the idea that the Lions were going to be bad, I grew up to the idea just being accustomed to the belief that the Red Wings were always great. I mean, there was a time in my life where I didn't know what it was like for the Red Wings to not be in the playoffs. I mean, I was born in 95. So like it was playoffs every year, And so just to kind of pivot, this has been now, a pretty long streak without a postseason berth. But even beyond that, we're coming up on a fair amount of time with Steve Yzerman in charge of things. And it's become very divisive because, there is the local attachment. There is the benefit of the doubt that you want to give a guy who's had a lot of success in the past. I guess with the playoff streak growing, how much longer is the leash going to be on Steve Yzerman? Is it playoffs next year or bust, or are they going to continue to give him opportunities to develop his gut?
I want to back up for a second. So I also grew up with the same affinity for the Red Wings. In fact, while I am a football fan more than any other sport, my first love was hockey because I grew up with this team being so dominant, so much fun going to games at Joe Louis Arena that it always holds a special place to me. And it's why I got at least a partial season ticket package just to go and be a fan, separate from the media stuff, to go and be a fan because they hold a special place to me. And I want them to get back in the postseason. And I want them to make more than just playoff appearances, but deep postseason runs. And I think that's where we've reached this critical juncture. So the patient crowd says, we're not just going to get in. We have to do it the right way. So when we're good, it's another 10 to 15 years where we're dominant. And that's all well and good, but you do have to get in at some point. Right. So 6 years under Yzerman, 9 years as an organization. It's the longest drought in the history of the Red Wings organization. Wow. They're going into their 100th season next year. And if they miss, it would be 10 consecutive seasons without making the playoffs. Steve Yzerman has drafted well. He also has to build a hockey team. We just got done talking about it with some of the guys that Weaver had assembled, and you could make the same parallel with some of the young players that Scott Harris inherited. You do have to assemble a team around those promising young players. And for Yzerman, critiques in free agency, the lack of the big, bold trade that he did make several of in Tampa, we need to see that, or this team will continue to stall out, continue to build frustrations among loyal fans who really care about this team and want it to work with Steve Yzerman. But if you don't give people results, I mean, we are in a results business here, and he knows that. I don't know for a fact. We haven't had a private conversation, but you can read the body language, and he's out and out said, I understand why fans are frustrated. But he does cite that they aren't going to do anything reckless, that they're going to stay the course, that they're going to do it this way through the draft. Fine. I like a lot of the players they've drafted, but they need to make some progress on the ice too.
It's a very interesting thing, and I think that almost every Detroit team has these parallels over the last several years, and some have had more success than others, where in the early part of a regime, I think fans are willing to give a GM or a president some time to, as Scott Harris has said, look under the hood, right? And I think that window has kind of begun to close when it comes to Yzerman, whereas like you brought up, it's results oriented, where people like us can talk about the farm system and what the future looks like and what they're drafting. But the casual fan that doesn't have the time that we have to obsess about these teams, they're checking the scores to see did they win last night.
No, I just, as a baseball guy, you know what, these prospects all don't pan out. So I could sell you on Axel Sandin Pellikka, who's this right shot Swedish defenseman who's putting up mega offensive numbers, and boy, I think he's going to be great. I don't know that it's going to translate for any individual player, and to assume that all will translate, I think, is a really dangerous thing to sell a fan base. No, I think, just to take it another tangent here, one thing that stresses me out or frustrates me in talking to Red Wing fans is they'll point out it takes longer in hockey. You draft 18-year-olds and then they have to go through the process and develop and turn into mature 23 and 24 and 25-year-olds. We all understand that. They act superior because they're more patient. That's the frustration I have with certain Red Wing fans, is that because they're more patient, they know puck. And I would point out there are other instances of teams, Montreal, in 3 years, bottomed out, popped back up. They're in the playoffs. They have a better pipeline farm system than even the Red Wings do. You can't bring that up to people because they don't want to hear it. And it's just one of these deals where I'm willing to be patient. You get 3 or 4 years to gut the team. Then you get 1 or 2 more where you have added those young players to your pro roster. You've given them long-term deals in the case of Seider and Raymond. We are beyond the prospecting period for the Detroit Red Wings. And if I'm going to be sold by people who, quote, know puck, that it has to go on forever, I question if they know puck or if they're just apologists, because I love this game. I love this team. I don't pretend that I can give you the X's and O's like someone who coached or played, but I pay enough attention to this to know that this is stalling out. And it's insulting when people suggest that they know more because they're willing to be more patient.
Yeah, and the parallels, I remember having these same debates during the Al Avila era where it's like, look, I understand that there was a period of time, maybe not so much with the Wings, but definitely with the Tigers, where like they weren't even really trying to win. I get that. There is something to be said about losing games but maintaining a winning culture and feeling as though you're being pushed in the right direction. And there was that year, ended up being Avila's last year here, where there were some expectations. It was after they made the big Javi Baez signing and they went out, that was their big splurge, and they got Erod and Mize and Scuba were coming up through the system. And you got the idea of like, okay, maybe this could be something. And I had expectations, but I remember telling people like, they're not good this year. Like, this thing's kind of failed. And ultimately, that ultimately led to Avila getting fired and bringing in Scott Harris, and it's kind of led to this little turnaround here. And I guess that's where we'll transition to, as of the time of this recording, the best team in the American League record wise, the Detroit Tigers. We'll see how long that lasts, but I think generally speaking, a lot to be excited about with how they've looked up to this point this season. And I do want to talk about this current team, but I want to start with what your takeaway was from the offseason, because I think that every Tiger fan right now who has been able to look under the hood is very excited and pleased with the direction that the organization is going in. That for the first time, really, I would argue in my lifetime, the farm system, the player development, everything is being pushed in the same direction. Everything is being pushed into the 21st century. That's all great. At the same time, like I mentioned a minute ago, results are what matters, and your major league product is what matters. And this was a team that, despite an amazing and super fun run a year ago, we looked at and said, probably need to add a little bit of offensive firepower. And as no disrespect to Gleyber Torres, who I think looks awesome, we're talking legitimate, 30 home run, 90 plus RBI thumb. Go ahead.
You know who agreed with us was Scott Harris, because they heavily pursued a prime right-handed bat. So we weren't like shouting into the ether. This was a pretty obvious, they, 2 of 23 in game 4 and game 5, runners in scoring position. It was the clear takeaway. Get someone who can deliver a proven bat, preferably right-handed because they're so lefty dominant. They publicly said it. They privately pursued it. I was bummed they didn't get Bregman. I think some people were lying to themselves going, we didn't want him anyway. I wanted him, still want him. He's a hell of a baseball player. It sucks he said no to us. And you could argue we should have accepted his counteroffer. But yeah, I think we were left wanting more at the end of the offseason.
Yeah, that was basically going to be my question is what was your assessment? Bizarrely, and I hate giving out moral victories, but like I did come away from it. I'm pleased with the offer that they gave him and now look, he said no. And ultimately what matters is he on the team? No, he's not. At the same time, I remember after 21 thinking Correa to Detroit makes so much sense. And there's really no reason why you shouldn't why you shouldn't pull the trigger on this. And this isn't even meant to, maybe it is a little bit, but this isn't even meant to be some anti-Javi Baez slander. It's just the AJ connection was there. Correa wanted to be a franchise player. He wanted to be a middle of the order guy. They needed a shortstop, and I didn't feel like they pursued him hard enough. And I thought they kind of cheaped out and went for the weakest option with Javi. I didn't feel that way with Bregman. I thought they put their best foot forward. I thought they gave him a really good offer. Now, kind of pivoting here, as of the time of this recording, they've found that 30 home run, 95 RBI pop in the form of Spencer Torkelson. And I did a radio hit a few weeks ago where I said the ceiling of this team is completely dependent on him, because you don't need that Alex Bregman. You know, you'd still like to have him, but you don't need him if you're getting this kind of production from Torkelson early part of the campaign. But has your assessment of the offseason changed based on what you've seen, not just from him, but really kind of the lineup up to this point?
The assessment of the offseason doesn't change, but the trajectory of the baseball team has definitely changed. Yeah. It's actually kind of funny, because remember when you were a kid and you'd be like, oh, Mom, can we get McDonald's? And your mom would say, no, we've got McDonald's at home. Yeah. And depending on how good of a cook your mom was, that was either a very exciting proposition or daunting or not. And when you hear, well, we've got our right-handed power at home, I was worried about some burnt food. And instead, it's been Spencer Torkelson, and this has been a tasty dish. This is a guy who looks like he's resurrected his career, a player that even the Tigers weren't counting on because they moved Colt Keith over to first base, assuming very little of Torkelson. I don't say that to take a shot at the Tigers. I say it to point out that we were all on the same page with it, that Tork was essentially left for dead, potentially starting in AAA, and this team would be nowhere near where they are without him. He is carrying their offense. He leads them in every major category offensively. He's an everyday first baseman. He's resurrected his career, and everyone's going to tell us it's April, and I understand that, so we'll put a pin in it. But it's given them a boost at a time where it's a tough schedule and there's a bunch of injuries, and they've needed it, and he stepped up in a huge way.
Yeah, it is April, and that's all true. And look, he looks great. I don't think he has a 1,000 OPS all season. I'll be real with that. At the same time, if that production falls off, you still have to highlight this section of the year in which he stepped up at a time with no Parker, no Vierling, no Wenzel Perez. You know, you've needed, and whether it's him or Dylan Dingler or Zach McKinstry, these guys have stepped up in the absences of some pretty important players here. So even if that production does drop off, you're going to be adding more depth. But you've obviously had the I call it the privilege. I think you would as well, of interviewing AJ many times. Yeah, he to me is one of the smartest people in baseball, and in a very good interview in terms of how he breaks down his team and how he breaks down the game. I also think that there has been a comfortability over the last several years here that maybe he didn't have in his first few campaigns, where I think that there was, coming off the Astros stuff and where he was, there was this kind of belief of like he kind of had to prove it again. Now I feel like he believes he's part of a much more well-oiled machine and everyone's kind of moving in the right direction. Have you noticed any change in him from the guy that maybe you first started interviewing several years back, and do you feel like he's stayed remarkably consistent?
I think he's mostly the same guy. I wouldn't fault you if you were reading into being more comfortable and putting the Astro stuff behind him and adding, whether he feels he needed it or not, some more legitimacy in the world of baseball from what the Tigers did last year, because that was largely on his back. Yeah. You know, I mean, we can credit individual players, but the way he was pinch hitting, pinch running, platooning, using all 26 guys, the bullpen chaos, all of it, I think he more than showed what kind of manager he is and reintroduced himself to the game of baseball. You're right to say it's a privilege to talking to him, because in doing the morning show, we get these regular interviews with coaches, and Campbell's awesome in the fall, but AJ is special in his own way in that he rarely will sugarcoat things. He knows what you're trying to ask, even if you ask it in a sloppy, choppy way, and he tries to give you a really thoughtful answer every time. So I've appreciated that. Even the one tense moment we had last year, we were able to laugh about it later. And you know, I really appreciate that he comes on and is as honest and transparent as he is.
No, he's one of the few managers in sports where I'll like pay legitimate attention to his post games, for actual baseball reasons. Like Leland, I would do it just because I was waiting for him to say something snarky or funny. Whereas like with AJ, it's like I'm always interested in him explaining why he made the decision that he made. And I think that one argument that I've gotten into with people before is like the effectiveness of managers in the sport of baseball. And, of course, like the same way that I don't think you can do this with a coach, you can't contribute or attribute X amount of wins to a manager and say he won them X amount of games a season ago. At the same time, and I'm glad you brought it up, this team doesn't make the playoffs with another manager last year. I don't think any other manager would have been capable of being as ingenuitive with the bullpen. I mean, they had one starter and for a long stretch of that run. What he's been able to do here with the manipulation of the lineups, with the use of the bullpen, has it changed the way that you've seen or assess baseball managers now, or have you always kind of seen the value in them?
I think you learn the more you watch. I think that's just a healthy way to be a sports fan, and specifically in sports media, you're always kind of paying attention and am I missing something? And what I really appreciated was last year in that series against the Guardians, watching AJ induce panic from the other manager. Mm-hmm. That's the ultimate compliment where, maybe I'm a step slow because I'm up in the box or I'm on my couch. But this guy's managing across from him, and it's going real time, real quick. And to get others to panic, other professionals who are paid and do this every single day and have all the numbers, and AJ Hinch making other managers panic like that was an eyebrow raiser. I think that shows you what we have here in Detroit.
Yeah, and I think that the staff he's assembled has been great. I mean, it made me so happy at the Game 3 of the Guardians last year when they were introducing the coaches and the players, the ovation that Chris Fetter got. I just love the fact that there's kind of this like life that that staff has taken, and I think that it's something that the fan base has connected with as well. One last question here about kind of and I want you to, it's a ranking question. I want you to put these four in order because we had Jeff Rieger on a few months ago, which, as you know, nightmare of a human being. I mean, just as bad as they get. I can't even joke about that. Rieger's amazing. He's always been supportive. But I asked him if Detroit sports fans are more or less cynical than they were a decade ago or when he started doing radio in Detroit. I'm going to ask you a similar question, and I'm going to put it in the context of where we are now, 2025. In 2025, if you had to rank the four major sports teams in the city of Detroit, their fan bases from most cynical at the top to least cynical at the bottom, where would you rank them right now in 25?
Man, this is such a good question. And I'm going to,
because I'll give you a second to think about it and just say there's been a lot of change. Because I think for the better part of our lifetimes, you would have had to put Lions one, right? Like it's like that was number one of the bullet. The last, 3 years, especially the last two seasons with the success they've had, regardless of what happened in the postseason, like it's shown it can happen here. Like you can put together an elite product. So that's the one where I don't know where you put them because they're.
I think they flipped it. I think they flipped it. I think they are the team that people are the least cynical about.
I think you're probably right. Yeah.
To the point where people are incredibly defensive of any criticism of them at all. And I talk about, I like the team as much as anybody. I want to see them win the Super Bowl. But if we dare question a draft pick or a strategy or why didn't they make this trade or even in game, hey, Dan Campbell, if you're going to do the onside kick here, should you have also done it there? And later he says, yeah, I probably should have. But the fans will stick up for him before you even had a chance to get it out of your vocal cords. The fan base, and understandably so, fully believes in what they're doing to the point where there is no room for any cynicism for the majority of the fans. I think the Lions have flipped it. That's pretty dramatic when you put it that way. The team that people would sideswipe in a conversation, you're not even talking about the Lions, to rip them, to now bending over backwards to defend everything they do because they believe passionately that these guys are going to get it done. I'd put them is 4 the least cynical.
4 is the least cynical, yeah.
4 is the least cynical, and then I kind of work backwards from there. The most cynical of all the fans. Could it be the Tigers?
You see, for several.
I ask you. You talk to Tiger fans as often or more than we do.
I would say at this point, I'm not putting them 1 anymore because I think that there is more. During the Avila era, there was division amongst division. Like even people you would have two people who didn't like Avila who would disagree on the levels in which they didn't like him. I mean, that's the kind of like divisiveness that we had.
That is pretty dysfunctional.
Yeah, it's like,
that
no,
is bad.
I'm angrier than you are type of thing. I think there is the approval rating of the current regime, AJ,
it's high.
But
yes.
Scott Harris at this point is so high that I would actually.
Some of this is, Chris.
Go ahead. Yeah.
Some of this is the hot start. If you had asked me this 6 weeks ago, people would have said, I don't know if they did enough in the offseason. I'm not sure they're serious enough. They're going to take last year for granted. But because they've started so hot, you're right. They probably get cooled down. To answer the question, I think I've got it. One is the Red Wings.
I agree.
Because of the infighting you were talking about, because even when we agree, we disagree about, are they far enough along? Are they ever going to get there? Are they doing it fast enough? The offseason moves, well, if you think about it, Tarasenko made sense on paper, even though it didn't work out. Are we allowed to be mad about it? There's a lot of that. Red Wings number 1. I'm going to put Tigers 2. I'm going to put Pistons 3. There's really no room for criticism of Trajan Langdon or JB Bickerstaff. I think it's a wait and see. How do they handle success? How aggressively do they try to speed this up? If Cade and company pull off a first-round series win, which I think is very real, do they make a bold move to build more? Or do they stay the course and let Ivy get his feet under him? And the decisions they make will be open to scrutiny. But I think right now everybody's feet kicked up, house money, wait and see. I don't think there's much cynicism at all with the Pistons. In fact, you may even be able to put them 4 now that I think about this.
Yeah, I guess the only reason I would still put the Lions 4 is, and it's, I don't know if it's related so much to cynicism, it's just like the Lions right now are on the Mount Rushmore of teams that can win a Super Bowl. And I think there's a comfortability that comes with that where
good point.
This has been a wildly successful season. I mean, they could lose the series to the next. It's still the most electric, like fun Pistons campaign in a long time. But the ultimate end goal is to be a championship caliber team. And the jury is, no fault of their own, still out. Yes, still out on that to a certain extent where like we know the Lions are in that inner circle right now.
And we'll be for a couple years here at least. Yes.
Yeah. So it's I think that would probably, but it's an interesting.
Do you agree with that then? Wings
I would.
1, Tigers 2, Pistons 3, Lions 4.
Yeah, I would. I was for a second thinking about flipping Pistons and Tigers, but I agree. I agree with you. Putting them 2, and it's really I think there's a big drop off between 1 and 2 because I think that last year's run bought them a lot of time, and this year's start was huge. That's what I says. Like last year was awesome, but if you have a 10-20 April, like you lose so much air is let out of that balloon.
Chris, I had this observation. It ties into this. So all the surprises for the Tigers, we did a topic the other day, and Torque is the biggest surprise, the best surprise, but he's not the only one. So you could highlight Dylan Dingler, and John made sure to highlight what he's done, not only managing the staff, but at the plate. That's your backup catcher coming into the season. So he's a great surprise. Javi Baez had an 8-pitch walk last night.
Yeah, I saw.
I mean, I want to frame the photo and put it in our studio because that to me, that's a different man. That's a great surprise. Job, as a rookie, very low expectations, just knowing what that is. He's been very good so far this season. Casey Mize, so many surprises, but the biggest surprise to me is that I'm not complaining about anything with this baseball team.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Like as a professional complainer, and we always find stuff to bitch about in baseball, you play every single day. I'm not worried about Riley Green's slump. I'm not panicked about Colt Keith. They don't need him to play the field right now. His bat will come around. I don't have any complaints about this baseball team, which is the biggest surprise given where we were 6 weeks ago going, what are they going to do in center field? Who's going to play third base? Do they have enough offense, period? They're going to strand runners 0 for 15 on opening day. Chris, I don't really think you have room to complain as a Tiger fan right now. And that's maybe the biggest surprise, not even a month into the season.
I would agree. I mean, I guess and I'm basically kind of repeating your sentiment here, but just to take it one step further, my biggest surprise is just how different and consistent the approaches are offensively compared to where they've been from players who you bring up Javi. I mean, like Javi, you see fucking Haley's Comet before you see Javi draw like an 8-pitch walk. It's like this. So it's
Chris, I rewatched it, and it's Dirk's talking bird watching with Benetti, but I had to rewatch it. I go, did this really just happen?
Yeah,
he drew an 8-pitch walk.
And it's like last night was a prime example of it, where you're putting pressure on pitchers early, man. It's 1-0, 2-0, 3-0 in the first inning. I think that is a huge sign of consistency in the kind of players and kind of at bats they want in this organization, which is, like Scott Harris's opening press conference says, we want to dominate the strike zone. I said, that's awesome. I think that's great. The biggest step is you got to get players that are capable of doing that. And I think now that it's the same thing when they move the fences in. I'm like, cool, more home runs for the other team, because we got to find some guys. We got to find some guys who can hit some. So I think that the player development and the fixing of players and the consistency offensively is really what's kind of shine through. Now, I say this knowing I'm about to jinx the hell out of everything, because this is uploaded tomorrow. So I want to apologize for the 2-0 loss to the fans who are listening to this on Wednesday. But in general, I think the point remains the same. This team has been looking really solid.
But I don't even dwell on a loss. Like, they lost Sunday, the last game of the Twins series. I don't dwell on it, right? They've won 4 straight series. If for some reason they don't win the Flaherty start tonight, I think they'll win the very next night, and they'll take their 5th straight series. So apologies to everybody if they lose the next 2. The jinx is on me, but they've instilled this belief. Some of that was last year, even when it didn't make sense to believe. But they've instilled this belief now where, yeah, sure, Ryan Kreidler's going to play center field. Do I like that? No. But he'll bunt the guy over. He'll get a hit. They'll figure it out. They'll scrap. They'll claw. And he won't be here in a couple weeks. Fingers crossed. So I really don't have much animosity at all.
No, I'm with you. I like the way they're going about their business, and I think it is carryover from last season. And it's a sigh of relief, considering how fun that run was. That you wanted to start out strong out of the gate. I have abundant faith that this will, because so much can happen over 162. But I have abundant faith this will be a competitive baseball team all year, which is kind of at this point, number one thing you can ask for. Look, we're coming up on time here, but
go ahead.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. I was going to say, it just sets up fun conversations for you all summer long, and for us in the morning all summer long, because now you can build on this idea of creating some separation or adding at the deadline, or just all the fun conversations that aren't, because I've watched your post-game videos, and we've seen you visibly go through all of the anguish and all of the losing that we have as well. And to say, like, hey, there's going to be more Chris smiling in these videos, that's a great thing. I think that's a tangible thing that we're all feeling right now.
Well, thank you. It's weird how it's worked, where it used to be the most popular videos were us being terrible, and now it's kind of flipped, where people are like, I kind of actually like to see this guy happy for a little bit. And so the last year or so has been very fun, but I know obviously that means a lot. Look, man, you've been killing it. I appreciate the job that you do on the radio, and obviously you're a very fun follow on social media as well. We'll have you on again at some point. You're officially a friend of the program, which is we're creating tier lists to it, I think, at some point. Boy. So if you're multi-time guests, that's kind of like your jersey's getting retired in the rafters. So you're not quite there yet. I think we've only had 3 multi-timers, and they're all Tigers related people, but you'll get there at some point. Either way, appreciate all that you've done. Appreciate you doing the show and taking the time, and I'll talk to you again soon.
Yeah, of course. I'll take the milestone of being the episode 50 guest.
Yes.
I'll use that. I'll make sure to pad my resume with that stat. And Chris, seriously, anytime you need anything, appreciate you. You're a great follow as well. And this is long overdue. We've been in similar circles, but we've never done something like this. So thanks for thinking of me, and I hope people enjoy the episode.
Yeah, of course, man. Thank you very much. The radio guys have been good to me, man. Whether it's Stoney, Rieger, Costa, Bellino, any one of these guys, they always give me a good interview. I expect nothing less. Costa's rapidly ascended in the Detroit market, in the broadcasting market, for a reason. So I really appreciate him hopping on and answering some questions and just kind of shooting the shit with me. Means a lot. All right, that will do it for episode 50. Before we get to the plug, just want to say, 50 episodes, halfway to the century mark, right? Appreciate all the support along the way. Some of my favorite stuff that I've ever done as a content creator has been doing this show, whether it's Tarek interviews, AJ interviews, stuff we've done with the broadcasters. I think the networking we've been able to do, but also just the product that we've been able to put out is something that I'm really proud of. I mean, the numbers are the numbers, but there's stuff that I look back on and I say, man, I feel like we're doing good stuff. And my producer, Austin Sisler, is a huge part of that. Shout out to him. Really, really, really appreciate him being a part of this journey with me. At Castellani 2014 on Twitter. Go to CastellaniContent.com. There you will find the links to everything that we do. That thing is getting updated every single day. If you want to get caught up on all the Tiger videos, you can do that. Not sure who the guest will be for next week. We're going to continue to work on that, but we will be back with another episode of I'll Say This. Potentially even some vlogs coming down the pike here as we progress further into baseball season and get closer to the summer. I'll talk to Austin about it. So Apple Podcasts, Spotify, watching on YouTube. You see this beautiful face, hit that like button, hit that subscribe button. I appreciate all of you. This has been a really fun journey, and we're going to continue it. And hopefully we can have more guests like Jim on, because I like interviewing smart people. So you guys are the best. I will talk to y'all real soon. Have a great rest of your week. Go Tigers. Peace and happiness.